Welcome to the Four Bars Podcast. I'm Ken Leith.
And I'm Patti Leith. We are your hosts for some compelling dialogue, encouraging our listeners to strengthen their connections
And build strong communities, lifting each other up and connecting in ways that matter.
We named the podcast Four Bars as a reference to how hard we work to find a Four Bars connection on our devices.
And we wondered what could happen with relationships if we worked as hard at connecting.
Let's find out.
Welcome back to Four Bars. I'm one of your hosts, Ken Leith.
And I'm Patti Leith. Welcome back. It's good to see you again.
Indeed. You're going to notice that this week is Patti and I together here. And we had some feedback and some questions about information about Four Bars that some of our viewers wanted to know a little bit more about. And also, how did Four Bars and exploring good connections in life, business, and community, how's that connect into what we do for our profession, for our job? And so today we're going to talk a little bit about that, share some information about some of the things we utilize, just to give some background on that. I want to start with a little bit about our company, which is called Edges, which Patti started back in 2001. Could you give us a little backstory on that?
Yeah, so Edges stands for, I'm big on acronyms. Ken is not as much, but
true.
He goes with it. It stands for Everyday Growth Equals Success. And I started as a one-person shop doing leadership coaching and training. And we have evolved, Ken joined me in 2006, we have evolved into a growth advisory firm where we work with organizations to plan for their growth and to develop their communication and their team members in order to meet their growth goals. We have a lot of fun with it. We've had some amazing experiences in doing that work. But one of the foundational pieces is this concept of connecting deeply with one another in ways that help us work out our challenges together. And so we've done a lot of work in this space that is specifically related to connectivity and engagement, and that's kind of how it connects. We have also done quite a bit of work in our coaching in helping people explore their connections, not only at work, but also in their personal lives, in their families, friends, community work, civic groups, etc. So.
No, that's a good way to explain that. So thank you. Really, as Patti said, our business really is about helping other businesses grow, and we do that with several different methodologies and focuses for those businesses that involve people from the C-suite down to the folks in the front line, because that is the best way we have found to really get everyone engaged and everyone moving in the same direction. Some of the key pieces that come along with that are, understanding, do I have a good plan? Do I have a roadmap for growth that I can share, that I can measure, that I can adjust if we're not moving the direction we need to get to or moving quick enough? Also, of course, then what are the processes that we have and are they aligned? Do people understand them fully? Do they understand where there are transitions, things of that nature? Two big pieces that I'll go to a slightly different area of the business here that make all of this happen. And people ask us frequently when we go in to meet a new potential client, what is it that we do a little differently? While we focus on those other areas, and we do also do executive and leadership coaching, we do focus on culture and communication a lot, because to make everything take off, to make it really as productive as can be, and have people understand that they're in a workplace where they understand their roles and they understand how they're going to interact with others and what those engagements might look like. Without them, people don't necessarily gravitate towards that. And then there can be some stagnation. There can be some stalling. One of the tools that we use, which was created, and Patti will give us a story here in just a second on that, is a tool called Interface Methods, which is a behavioral tool. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how that tool also helps people and helps businesses grow and how they intersect. Could you talk a little bit about the tool?
Yeah, I will.
And what the name of the tool is and everything?
Yeah, I will. I started working on the tool not long after I started the business. And in fact, I had really thought through the strategic plan for the business even before starting it. But I after doing some research, realized that a team's inability to work together came down to one prevalent thought, which is, ugh, you're not doing it right. And I can sort of see our 7-year-old granddaughter saying that to the 5-year-old when I talk about it. But as team members, we expect people to work like we do. And that was keeping, and it does keep, but I realized it was keeping people from really coming together and working together. So I started working on a tool that helped us build a stronger interface. That's why we call it interface methods. We were originally going to call it Connect Me. And the team that was working with me at this time, I know watches the podcast, you'll laugh about it, remembering that we opted away from that because it sounded like it was a dating site. So we went with interface methods. We wanted to put together a behavioral tool that identified those differences. And we found that there were 3 of them. And when I explain them, you'll think about not only your work teams, but also people in communities that you interact in and people in your family. The 3 differences were how much detail do we want. Some people want a lot. They want to execute process. They want to be very meticulous about it. Some people do not. They want to think more about what we're going to do than how we're going to do it. And they want to stay bigger picture. When those are different, we judge the other person's capabilities. Second item is how do we process our ideas and how do they go from 0 to 60? Some of us like to do that internally and some of us like to do that externally. When it's different, we think the other doesn't have enough commitment to engage in the way that we want them to. And we'll share a little more as we get deeper into this. And then the last item is how do we influence? Behaviorally, what language do we pick when we're trying to convince someone to do something differently? There are cautious influencers who are more diplomatic and more cautious in the way they present their message, and there are direct influencers who are more forthright and a little more concise in the way they present their message. These 2 languages cause a judgment. Not only do they cause a judgment, they cause a disconnect that keeps us from getting our message across. So super important in any connection that we have, whether it's being married, interacting with our kids, or people in our workplace.
No, it's very true. It interacts and connects into all areas of where we live and as far as all humans. Like any great thing or good thing that is utilized out there, it doesn't necessarily get done in a vacuum. And you and your team at the time also had some assistance from the outside.
We
Can
did.
you talk a little bit about the origin of that and how that intersected and helped?
Yeah, we did. We had a client, and they are still a client. They've been a fantastic business partner for us over the last 24 years. And one of their people came and asked me if I knew of a tool that was behavioral in nature rather than psychological and easier to remember than the Myers-Briggs and a little more team focused than some of the others that were out on the market, like the DISC or the Berkman. And I said to him, I'm working on one. And my background is in industrial organizational psychology. And he laughed, but he's like, "You're serious, aren't you?" And I said, I am. And he asked me to tell him about it. And I was originally working on this tool to present at a mentoring conference for women, women in networking conference. And I was designing it to connect people who were different so that they could help each other value those differences.
Yeah.
And so I explained all that to him, and it was February. And he said, what would it take for us to have it ready by May? And I said, well, I'd need a steering committee that could meet with me several times during that time. And he asked if he could get a discount on it for a period of years. So I gave him a 5-year discount. They're still using it. And I holed up in a coffee shop for 2 days and finished the tool and developed the spreadsheet to generate the feedback. So that's how it came to be. And it has gone through 20 iterations since it was in an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah. Now it's online. Now we have a learning hub. So lots of fun doing it, and a fantastic business partner. The management committee that worked as my steering committee consisted of 8 managers at different levels in that organization, to really help us get it on point for the behavioral feedback that team members needed in order to not judge each other and to intentionally adapt for a better outcome.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because it really brings the richness to, you know, how do things actually become what they are, so to speak. And one of the things that often people ask us is, how does this behavioral instrument actually help a business grow? Okay. Because people ask, well, what is it? And it's a behavioral tool that can help people. And one of the differences, for example, is that the behavioral tool is something that, because it's behavioral, we can adapt, we can adjust. Once we understand how to utilize it and the impact of it, how to identify certain key things within interactions with others. Again, good connections in business and community and life. And so with the other difference there, or that difference there lies, is when psychological assessments and tools, we don't change our wiring very easily. And you can speak to this here also in a second, while we can adapt behaviorally. So that's one of the unique differences why this is a tool that can really help people interact in a day-to-day basis in their offices, with their clients, within their vendor partners, anything like that. The tool is very effective for that. And we'll give some examples today as we talk, how that plays out a little bit.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What do those interactions entail?
Yeah. So personality tools are a little more ingrained. When I take a personality instrument, whether it's as a coaching or to cue up a team building, we learn a lot about ourselves and each other, but we're not necessarily identifying characteristics that we can adapt or change. They're sort of inherent in our nature. And so the behavioral tool is identifying characteristics that can change if we want them to.
Yes.
But in order for that to occur, we have to recognize the difference, not as something that is, oh, you're not doing it right, but something that is really like, oh, you're coming at this from a different angle. I bet between us, we can make a better whatever, right? So, yeah.
No, that's very good. Because they may not let out that sound, but they have a face, and
it's on the
you hear
inside.
it.
It's on the inside.
And probably for everyone who is watching today, it is something that you've experienced in your personal life, in your business life. As Patti said, this engagement actually works in every phase of life. Yes, with children over a certain age, of about 13.
13, yeah.
And also with spouses and family members. Again, just with friends even. We have utilized this, for example, with married couples. We've utilized this tool. I will say it all went well. There was no bloodshed. Everyone took something out of it. And there was a lot of fun. Fun example is one couple of this, and talking about some of the differences, one of the members was very, very detail-oriented with respect to that, and organizes things very, very well. Most of us would love to aspire to that. But in their situation, she will do things such as ensure that everything's aligned in the pantry a certain way, and that whereas most people just put it in there and probably put it in certain areas close by, but align every label, just do these things that are important to her. And it keeps her life moving forward with respect to, as all of us have something in our lives that we do. Another thing is how we stack a dishwasher. And who knew that there could be discussions about dishwashers? Right. And we'll talk about dishwashing in a bit. But, her husband is different, dramatically different. He appreciates the fact that she stacks the cans and does all that, but that's not his thing. So he's not always putting them back. That can lead to some conversations that you have there about that. And stacking the dishwasher, I will say, conversation very interesting. I would like to have you delve a little bit into that, and I will add too.
Yeah, so this gets at that difference of detail and structure. that we want. Where some people are very detailed and very structured, they want process steps. They want to be able to implement and to maintain what they've put in place. And this particular couple, she is that person. I mean, we used to mess with her at Christmas parties where we would go in and just turn the labels in her pantry slightly so that it would just irritate her, and we'd all laugh about it. But she was very, very strong in the structure, and her husband is less structured. And so when it comes down to stacking the dishwasher, the more structured in a couple almost always wants to restack behind the less structured.
Yes.
Because it is not meeting the structural guidelines. So we were actually at my son's graduation when he texted her a picture of the dishwasher as a joke to say, hey, can I start this? Because she's always restacking it behind him, and this came out at our couples workshop. So anyway, it's a funny difference that many of us have. And we are often attracted to people who process very differently from us because it's cool. You complete me, and then you don't. Then you're just doing it wrong.
Just for clarity, we're not referring to me.
We're
in
not.
that scenario.
We're not.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, we're similar in that scenario. Although you are more structured than I am.
I am the person that does some restacking the dishwasher occasionally. Yes.
And I'm like, well, why did I do it in the first place?
And I can understand that feeling also. I've come to learn that.
Yeah.
But again, it's something that when we know these differences, they become more benign, and they don't become things that create stress or friction because we just understand they are just different ways of doing it.
Yeah, and that really is what the work is about. That really is what we believe builds good connections, is the willingness to show up as you're comfortable showing up, but then read the room to see where you might need to adapt in order to make that connection stronger, in order to be able to communicate in a way that has greater influence, in order to be able to support a person in the way that they need to be supported. That's what builds strong relationships. It's what builds strong community.
And strong businesses. And
Back in 2012, I published a book, and the dishwasher segment is in there, called Judge Not, A Guide to Influence People Who Think Differently.
Yes.
And it really is about these differences. Like, you don't have to take the tool to look for them, to recognize them, and to go, ooh, you have a lot more detail than me, so I need to present this with the level of detail that you need. Or the opposite is true. Oh, you are not thinking about the detail, so I don't need to show it to you. I need to talk in terms of outcomes. And our natural tendency is to think, oh, you're not thinking about the detail. Here, you should. Let me give it to you. And that's not what works when we're interacting with people who just want a different level of structure in their work.
Absolutely.
And the reality of it is, in that difference, this level of detail, the level of structure, the people who are very structured are extremely good at process and implementation and taking the actions that are necessary to meet the goals. And the people who prefer to be big picture, more visionary, more whole to parts, are talking in terms of outcomes and goals. Both are needed in anything that you do. Actions have to lead to goals. And one of the biggest challenges in a company that's growing is I'm doing a lot of work and it's not getting me the goals that I want. And so you have to connect those. And it takes people from both preferences to come together to make the work as robust as possible.
Yes, and we are diving in a bit now more into the interface methods tool and talking about that. Could you also share the names of the different pieces?
Yeah, I can. And so the individual who prefers structure, process, parts to whole is called an evergreen. And so if you think about the evergreen, they are consistent and stable and they don't change a whole lot. The person who prefers the strategy, the vision, the bigger picture, and the outcomes, they look at things from whole to parts. They're called a changing leaf because they are ever changing. They are dynamically looking at things. They are thinking in a circular fashion rather than a linear fashion. And so those differences, and there's a continuum. You can be sort of balanced, you can be moderate, you can be really strong. I'm really strong on the changing leaf side, but it is not ability, right? So as a strong changing leaf, I've always been really good at math. I can balance the books, and I do for our company balance the books and be very meticulous in the way that I do that. I don't make mistakes when I do it, but when I am done, it has used a enormous amount of energy in my psyche, because that adaptation does take energy. What I want to do when I'm done doing the books, outside of drink a good glass of wine, is I want to design something, because that's what gives me energy in the changing leaf side of me. Right.
Very good. And just to point too, not everyone kind of looks the same, when it comes to says, oh, this person is more structured, this person is less structured, need more detail versus less detail. Okay. For example, one of our clients, they had grown, and so they built another facility, and they moved offices. Of course, they had movers come in, move the offices. The CFO of this organization, you may remember this, and he was very good at what he does. But we think people who have more structure, and versus not having more structure, they would have a look of, like you said, everything filed, maybe put in a certain way, labeled a certain way. He happened to be someone who did not need all the structure as a CFO, but he could still locate things. And I'll give you an example. He would have a stack of files on his desk that he just seemed to keep. And they would be this size sometimes. Yeah. But I could always go into his office and was never surprised when he said, I want to show you something about what we're talking about. And he would look at this pile and just reach into a folder area and be able to pull out what he needed without having any labeling to it or anything. I'll fast forward to it to say that when they did move his stuff over, they went ahead and filed everything. It put him in disarray for about 6 months before he really got comfortable again and stuff. So these things do happen, but we don't all look the same in how we make all this work for us.
Yeah. And in that particular scenario, you may remember that he was a changing lead. Yes. And we were surprised because we do often stereotypically expect something from a certain role. Because he was a CFO, we thought, structure, right? Yes. And this was early in the use of the tool. And what we've come to find out is it really doesn't matter what your role is. You can be in either work preference. It's just a matter of making your work preference work for the expectations of your role. And he had done that. And if you are one of these less structured people like I am, I've got files and I know exactly where they are. Ken was asking me the other day, he's like, I'll go downstairs and get it for you. Where is it? And I said, oh, it's in a file about this far down. And we both laughed. Like, that's sort of, I know where it is, but it doesn't look structured to the outside eye.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. But it's the methodology that works for that person, so to speak.
Now on this one, you're more balanced. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I am.
You're what we call a connector.
Yeah, so between the changing leaf and the evergreen, my score was pretty much in the middle, what we call the middle quadrant there. That area there allows, if you think of it, it's almost like being bilingual. Being able to speak easily, move back and forth between two languages. In this case, it's easily being able to move back and forth between adapting to someone else's style. Yeah. Someone who's less structured and someone who's more structured. I am a changing leaf, as Patti said, but I'm balanced. With that, I always tried, especially in my corporate world, where I worked on before joining Edges, I was always looking to ensure that I tried to make the best decision and look at all the points of data. And I would sometimes be looking at something that was more of a detailed kind of solution. And sometimes it was more of, I was giving information that was more big picture and not giving all the detail. During that time, when I was still working back east in the Washington, D.C. area, Patti, I asked her to come out and work with my company and work with my leadership team. in order to be able to take them through a executive coaching program.
And the important thing here is we still got married.
Yes.
Just
I
saying.
had people at my old job who said that wasn't going to happen once you had my psychological wiring. But what I found out through the coaching process that Patti took them through was, instead of helping them by giving them best information, I was actually not empowering them. And I got feedback from them in these one-on-one meetings that I would have with them as part of the coaching, and which was very helpful for me, because what it allowed me to do was then to realize, while I thought I was doing stuff with good intention, I was really impeding their growth. What I found that I needed to do was to be able to, if I'm going to make decisions based upon needing, sometimes in my mind, needing to have more data, sometimes being a big picture and looking at the outcomes, I needed to share with them my thought process and be able to really let them understand why sometimes I chose one, why sometimes I chose the other, instead of being more consistent. Because being consistent is very good for people often. But what I did was I took about 3 months, and for any time I was involved with working with them on a decision, I had to be very intentional about explaining the why. Why was it that I chose this more details over here versus maybe something that was a larger, more systemic solution over here? And it really, what I saw was incredible. It was a wonderful experience for me. I think for them too, is I actually saw them become empowered the way I wanted them to. And they got very confident in being able to make the same decisions. And our decisions don't have to always be the same way anyway. They just need to have a good outcome. But they were able to be confident in their choice of the decisions. And they could always come and ask me about it. But I saw them grow as a result of that. And for me, that was very rewarding, because now I was kind of living what I wanted to do originally with them, but wasn't doing for them. So that's a little background on that one.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think this difference is very significant when teams are working together, because we try hard to really read the other person and then respond accordingly to what we see. But we have a very strong penchant for the level of detail we think is necessary to work through a problem, which is what leads to this, oh, you're not doing it right. You need too much detail. Stop, you're killing my ideas. Or on the other side of that, you're not thinking about the detail. One of the things that I have noticed with you being balanced, you are very good at what we call connecting. You're very good at taking the idea and really thinking about the parts that will lead to it, and then also identifying parts of our processes that may not be leading to our goals. But I have noticed too that when I'm really big picture, you can go there with me, but you'll have a tendency to try to fill in the details because I'm not thinking about it, right? And so we do sort of try to adapt and help each other think through the things that don't come quite as naturally. But when I'm prompted to go deeper into the details, I can.
Yes.
It takes a lot of brain power, and you can almost smell it burning in there.
And it really, it energizes teams. We see that on a regular basis once they understand these differences, and that these differences actually are powerful. These differences are things that can enable them to achieve more together. And we see it and we utilize it. For example, we utilize this tool when we start an engagement with a team for designing their roadmap and helping them kind of set off and make sure that they can execute that roadmap. We do it when we start talking about processes, because it's so important to understand sometimes who's in the room and what are their preferences in these areas, these key behavioral areas that you want to make sure sometimes you have a good balance. If you have everyone who's big picture, you're going to be very innovative, and people are going to have these really great ideas. But what you may lack is the ability to turn those ideas from concept into execution. It's something that is deliverable. So you might find that your efficiencies go down. You may find that you're not going to market with as many things. You're getting conceptual ideas, but you're not really building them all the way out. And then conversely, if you have folks who are predominantly those folks who are more detail oriented, more evergreens in the room that are working on it, they're going to make sure it's going to be functional, that it's connecting the dots, A to B, C. But typically what you might be missing, not necessarily would be, but you might be missing is that innovation side that really pushes it. So you might find yourself sliding a little bit with respect to your competition, staying up to with them. So that's where these things come in. They become bigger issues for organizations, whether you're small or large. They have impact, and in our personal lives. Let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead.
Well, I was just going to also make, while we're talking about this detail structure thing, we have a tendency to connect more with people who want the same level of detail that we do. I've even noticed in classes where somebody who is an evergreen is speaking and the evergreens are leaning in to listen, right? Because they're getting what they need, and the changing leaves are sitting back like, oh, it's too much detail for me. And vice versa, right? And so one of the things that we've seen in our work is that there's a tendency to want to hire people more like you. And that will really impact the work the team can get done and slant it more one way or another, when really you know, all ideas need good execution strategies, and all activities should be leading to goals and outcomes. And with only one or two people who prefer detail, the ideas don't get airborne, and vice versa. With only one or two people who prefer the ideas, they don't get a lot of creativity and innovation. So these are things to think about as you're thinking about staffing. Your team, we often are more comfortable with somebody that gets us. And then that's sort of, whether we realize it or not, that sort of comes across in the interview. And the next thing you know, your team is not as balanced as might benefit the work that your team does together. Just food for thought.
That is very, very good, and something to keep top of mind too. Again, we've seen some fun interactions over the years. So would you tell us about one or two?
Yeah, I think one of the most substantial was an organization that was growing pretty rapidly, and their CEO was a changing leaf, and their COO was an evergreen. And initially, the difference was substantial enough to sort of drive them a bit nuts, but they began quickly to realize they together they make a whole person, or together they can build a really great strategic plan from the top to the bottom. And they got to where they would really sort of talk about this in in staff meetings, like, hey, can you evergreen that for me? And the recognition that you're different, you bring details to the table. Let's call each other to work together was a lot of fun to see. And then he would say to her, I may not be coming up with enough ideas. Let's spitball this, and let's spend a little time in creative land. And so those were kind of fun. But at the end of the day, they worked together for many years, and they'll both still tell you it was a difference that served them and their companies amazingly well. We also see this difference often in married couples, as we mentioned with the story at the beginning and the dishwasher story.
Yes.
But you think about a married couple or a partner, your significant other, you don't have to be married, your significant other. If there's a difference here, one of you wants to show up on vacation in a place, find the location you're staying on the way, and figure out your activities once you get there. I'm that person in our relationship. I've been known to book an Airbnb on the way to the destination, but what I find often is there's some really cool things that if I had done it a little more planfully, I would be able to partake in, because like all the snowmobiles are booked or, whatever. Whereas on the evergreen side, that vacation is generally planned in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
We had, and my friends all tease me because I'm usually the show up and look girl. But we did have a big birthday planned for you in 2020. And I planned a trip for 14 people to go to Napa. And it was on a spreadsheet, and my friends were all like, how is she doing this? But I had all the details. We ended up not taking the trip because it was in May of 2020.
Yes.
And the pandemic created the trip that never was. But that's something else that's kind of, it can be fun if you let it be. It can also be super annoying if you want to plan everything and I don't, or I want to plan everything and you don't, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah. And again, Patti created this, and we are practitioners. We utilize this with clients all the time, but we have some of the same challenges sometimes, and we just get in a day-to-day scenario. I'll talk about one of those. Is we had this really, really organized and detail-oriented office manager working for us.
Yes.
She was exceptional, and she was with us a long time. And Patti being when in that range that she talked about, kind of balanced in the middle, what we call select is where it's moderately your preference, or where it's called chosen, which is a very strong preference.
Yeah, and I'm out here chosen on the changing leaf side. Like, I want to ideate, I want to innovate, I don't want things to be the same, and not A to B to X to 1.
She's a 16 changing leaf.
Which out of 16.
Yeah. Our office manager was a 16 evergreen herself.
Yeah.
So opposites, both really exceptional what they do. But the way it plays out sometimes is even with the best of intentions, we kind of get busy in day to day, we hand stuff. And sometimes as a person working with someone, changing leaves will give the amount of detail they want to receive to the evergreen. Thinking, okay, I gave them everything they needed. But for someone who really needs those details to be productive and who builds around those details, it could be something that prohibits them or something that can frustrate them. And indeed, there was a little bit where Julie would just struggled a bit with some of that. And she did, not to any fault of her own, she just wasn't getting the detail. And she didn't say anything at first about it. She's like trying to figure it out, like a lot of people do in their workplace. So finally, she came and talked to Patti and said, I'm struggling a little bit to get what you need. And then they talked about it, and it was really just simply about she needed more detail, and Patti was giving her changing leaf language.
Yeah, I was. I was giving her more outcomes, like what we're going to do, not how we're going to do it. And changing leaves, and if you're watching this and you haven't taken the tool, you probably know which one you are. Changing leaves, we have a tendency to get frustrated when someone needs more data because well, then should I just do it, right? Yes. But what she asked for was legit. If I gave her enough detail to get her started, she could deliver the work in a way that I needed, and then I would not have to do. But I also needed an adaptation from her. She was extremely detail-oriented, so if she would send me an email needing something, it might be in the 12th paragraph, and I never get that deep into the detail. Like, I skim it once I get past the first or second paragraph. And so I asked her, can you put, if you need an action, in the subject line, action needed, and can you put it in the first paragraph and highlight it? Because then I could look for the detail I needed to give her what she needed, but I didn't miss it because I didn't go into the detail. And so that was an important adaptation that she and I made too. We just loved working together. And
it took a little time. I mean, like with anything, one of the things we tell people frequently and we share with them is sometimes you have to just kind of go back a few times and have a little fun with it. When someone's trying to make the adaptation, it may take a little bit of time. At first, what you provided Julie was more detail, but still not what she needed enough. And then you wrote, and one of the things you wrote was still kind of high level, even the way you wrote it. But once you figured that out,
we got better at it.
You got very, very in tune with exactly what she needed. But it's your willingness at that time, we tell everyone, to keep going back and trying, and then sometimes just simply to laugh about those differences.
We have a 6-step process for influence. The first step is spot that there's a difference. Like some people come into the mix not expecting there to be a difference, and so you've got to spot the difference, and then you have to figure out what that difference is. This tool gives you an opportunity to just look at 3 different areas that matter a whole lot, and if you see a difference there and adapt to that, that makes a huge difference. The third is craft your adaptation, and the fourth one is keep trying. Like we were doing. Mm-hmm. The fifth one is let's talk about it. Develop a common language so that we're not just throwing our hands up when we get too much or not enough detail, but we're in fact saying this is much better, but let's work on it here or there, and we can give each other that feedback. And then, as Ken said, the 6th step is laugh a lot. Like you got to have fun with this stuff.
We spend a lot of time when it's a work-related thing, mm-hmm. and if we're not, we're at home. So if you're having a challenge in either place, it can just be something that feels like sometimes it's overwhelming. Yeah. Really, it's not, and that's the great thing about that.
Well, and as we wrap up, if you have listened to this and you are thinking about people in your personal life, or your your work communities or your civic community groups, and you have some fun stories about these differences, we'd love for you to share them with us on our website, 4barspodcast.com. And when I started this, I told you that this is only one of 3. There are 2 others. This, how do I process my ideas? And then how do I influence? We're going to tackle those in subsequent podcasts so we don't run for too long and lose your interest. But we'd love to get more feedback from you all on the types of things you'd like for us to cover. There is one thing I want to say about the Interface Methods tool. The tool itself is not a measure of ability, so as such, it's not a hiring tool. Mm-hmm. But we do have a lot of clients that use it to onboard their teams, and they do see better engagement.
Yes, they do. Generally, about on average, from the measurements, about 60 to 65% faster are they compared to someone, an organization
into
that
their
doesn't
team.
do it. And the reason they get that is because when someone comes on board to an organization that uses as an onboarding tool, that person as part of their onboarding takes the interface tool. Mm-hmm. And once you take the interface tool, then you actually become part of, you put in who your leader is. Mm-hmm. And then you go on to a report that shows everyone who reports that leader and their behavioral styles. Mm-hmm. Typically, when we are new in an environment, could be work, could be social, could be whatever, there's a little bit of feeling out, developing language, trust that goes on. But one of the key things about that is I need to know several things about the person before I can start to really have dialogue, that's significant, start to have trust with them, even if my job is to onboard someone. So what happens here is the new team sees the behavioral preferences, so they know how to approach and how to interact with this person in the way that person would prefer. Mm-hmm. And that's the key to this. Anyone can adapt.
Yeah.
It's the willingness to adapt that really brings it to life and makes success. And then the other side of that is that the person who comes on board, they see everyone on that report so they can interact and adapt to their methodologies. So it really brings to life much more quickly that relationship, and that person can feel better and more productive sooner when they go to a new organization.
Yeah. So it's great onboarding tool.
Absolutely. I think the other thing for me when I think about utilizing tools like this and interface methods, again, it goes back to we started earlier with the fact that how does it help companies grow? And it helps companies grow because people can utilize these tools internally, but we also have clients who utilize it very strongly externally. They listen to keys because you can pick up on keys. Is someone talking more in detail or are they talking about outcomes?
Yeah.
Then I can adapt my language to them. We have clients who utilize this with customers that are existing customers. We have them that utilize it when they are prospecting.
Yeah.
And asking questions and hearing the way they are. And they may or may not be exactly right, but by adapting towards where they hear that person is utilizing the language of, mm-hmm. what it does is it allows them to connect better.
Yeah.
And if I connect better, I have a better chance to influence and I have a better chance to influence, I have a better chance to get the outcome that I'm seeking.
Yeah. So it matters a lot, this difference in if I'm going to sell to you, if I'm going to service you with, deal with a challenge that you might have or process something for you as a vendor to you. The customer service aspect of this matters a lot because we would like to receive a sales message and a customer service solution in the level of detail we think is needed for a situation, not the level you think is needed, right? And so that's a good takeaway as well. And we can get into a little more of that in subsequent podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I will also say that you mentioned 4barspodcast.com. If you want more data, like you said, please just let us know. Today's podcast came from input from viewers, and we want to hear from viewers what you would like to hear, topics, potential future topics for guests that we would bring on, things of that nature. Also, when you go to 4Bars Podcast, if you could subscribe to our podcast, please get more information from us there. And we are going to be installing in there opportunities for we will be installing certain kinds of tools that listeners who are subscribed can go in and they can utilize those tools for them, whether again in your personal life or in your professional life. Yeah. And we'll let you know when those are being uploaded from segment to segment, episode to episode of that nature. Again, we want to thank you for taking the time to be with us again today. And as you head forward into the rest of your week, try some of these out. If you want to have some fun, you go to Patti sometimes says my idea of fun, it really isn't all that fun, but go to a services place, a Lowe's, Home Depot. Listen to the way that people ask questions and interact with the folks who work there. Are they asking questions about details? And that person's more likely going to be an evergreen.
Or you could go to a bar and see how much detail you can get out of the bartender when you ask them questions. That's another way to do it.
That is another way to do it, but I probably won't ask them any questions like that.
I ask a lot of questions, but when it comes to stories,
absolutely,
it's a good way to get people to share.
So again, thank you for being here, and we look forward to our next podcast.
We look forward to our next podcast with you. Have a great week. The 4Bars Podcast has been brought to you by Edges Inc., a growth advisory firm based in Bentonville, Arkansas. I founded the company in 2001.
Edges promotes growth of people, companies, and ideas. Our team collaboration tool, called Interface Methods, is a basis for teams to work together more collaboratively, understand each other, and accept differences and address challenges together.
We also started a nonprofit called Unform Your Bias. We teach kids and their adult influencers how to utilize storytelling as a means to reduce bias in the world. We hope you'll check us out, subscribe to our podcast, and look at our websites.